Now we're going to get back to Brandon, who did a Mac attack yesterday in Pennsylvania. And Brandon has been popping off too good. So, of course, when he's popping off too good, he's got to f up. You can't let him be a good candidate. You got to have him be a bad candidate. He was a tough on crime malarkey guy in PA.
If I can just interject for a moment, my deceased son, Bo, he was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And what he used to do is go down on the east side, what's called the Bucket, highest crime rate in the country. There's a place where I was the only white guy that worked as a lifeguard down in that area.
Yeah, Corn Pop! Please tell us about Corn Pop. Go ahead. Do it. On the
east side. And you know where you can always tell where the best basketball in the state is and the best basketball in the city is. It's where everybody shows up.
I'm the only white guy working with the black kids. They play basketball. They love basketball. I love kids sitting on my lap. Anyway, I got hairy legs. You know what's really funny? Someone who is not like kept up with everything that Brandon has said is probably going to look at me and go, what the f*** are you saying? Every single thing that I just said in Brandon voice, Joseph Robinette Brandon has said. Like every single thing that I just said is a verbatim, word for word quote from Joseph Robinette Biden. Literally verbatim. Here. So Biden is actually talking about a very old story that he loves explaining, that he loves telling, okay? For those of you who don't know, here it is. Anyway, we're done with that. Whenever he wants to talk about like reactionary ways of dealing with crime, he always talks about his bona fides in the black community, which revolved around him being a lifeguard in a predominantly black neighborhood and almost beating the shit out of a black dude who he kicked out of the pool because he wasn't wearing a hair cap, a hair net. That's his main story. That's his bona fides. Because the other stuff is the crime bill, which is not good. You know what I mean?
Many Republicans have criticized the FBI for investigating the former president, and some have even shown sympathy for the January 6th rioters who attacked police. All that has given President Biden an opening on the campaign trail. Yesterday, he used a speech in Pennsylvania to try to position the Democrats as the party that is toughest on crime. Ed O'Keefe has more.
On the airwaves in states like Pennsylvania.
John Fetterman wants to release convicted murderers from prison.
Public safety is why I ran for office.
And now, on the stump.
I'm opposed to defunding the police. I'm also opposed to defunding the FBI.
How to fight crime and gun violence are taking center stage. During a stop in Pennsylvania Tuesday, President Biden attacked those Republicans who've called for defunding the FBI in response to its search of former President Donald Trump's home in Florida.
Trump 2020!
And denounced Republicans who defend rioters at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
You can't be pro-law enforcement and pro-insurrection. You can't be a party of law and order and call the people who attacked the police on January 6th patriots.
The increased focus on law enforcement, crime, and guns on both sides of the aisle comes as the majority of likely voters see crime and guns as very important issues after the economy and inflation. And while some GOP officials say they want to defund the FBI, most rank-and-file Republicans don't back the idea. Nearly half of registered voters overall say they'd be less likely to vote for a candidate who supports that position.
I'm sure he's going to spend more money that we don't have.
But Republicans like Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson doubt the president's calls for more police funding.
Democrats are very good at providing a title on a bill that promises many things, but they just never deliver on it.
Now, President Biden returns to Pennsylvania tomorrow night to Philadelphia to give a speech on what he likes to call the ongoing battle over the soul of the nation. And voters in Northeast Pennsylvania are getting a visit from former President Trump when he campaigns with Republican candidates on Saturday night.
Local news turns straight up fashion when talking about crime. Dude, so bad. I've been saying this for many, many years. A lot of you are on the internet, so you are the furthest away from like local news watchers. But you've probably seen it. You've probably seen your grandparents. You've probably seen your parents. If you've ever had a conversation with someone over the age of like 30, you most likely have talked to someone who is absolutely fucking consumed local news and has incredibly reactionary points of view. And It is all coming from this psychotic, bloodthirsty attitude that local news has when covering crime. It's super anti-black too. It's super anti-immigrant. It's super anti-black. Anytime a black person commits a crime, no matter where it is, no matter what the crime is, they will cover it. They will show you the CCTV footage, and they will scream bloody murder. Part of that is because if it bleeds, it leads. Yes, delayed reaction. You're correct. Part of that is also because they are absolutely collaborating with the police and performing the same role that the police force performs, which is to protect capital. And the other reason is because at the top of the hour, there's a 6-second ad break. I've talked about this a lot with respect to American imperialism, with respect to like patriotism, John Kerry being put forward against Bush as like the real patriot, or Amy McGrath going up against Mitch McConnell as the real patriot, and how stupid that is. If you concede to the reactionary talking points across the board, if you concede to the reactionary talking points like, crime is being caused by like DAs that release fucking criminals into the street or whatever, you're never going to win that conversation. And all you're doing is basically legitimizing the underlying attitude, the underlying faulty premise that crime is being committed as a consequence of anything but the material conditions that people are subjected to. And that's really fucking stupid. And Democrats are doing it again. The adequate way to deal with the increase in crime right now is to, one, try to calm people down as best as possible by saying, listen, look at the numbers, look at the data. The data does not show, the FBI data and the crime data from these police departments itself does not actually show the hysteria that the media is trying to create. It's fucking fake news. But also, crime is not some random phenomena. It does not happen in a vacuum. It happens as a consequence of the material conditions that people are subjected to. There are plenty of examples of successfully tackling crime. The best way to do so, especially for the youth, for example, you got the Kia Boys everywhere. You got Kia Boys in Minnesota. You got Kia Boys in Florida now. They're using USBs to steal Kias, Kia Sorentos. So easy, they say. These are industrious children. They're bored. They got nothing going on in their lives. Milwaukee, bro. Sorry. They got nothing else going on. We got to keep these kids busy. We got to make sure that these 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, these brilliant kids, these beautiful kids that I love sitting on my lap playing with my leg hairs, need to find an adequate outlet to be able to exercise. We need these Kia Boys to play in leagues, to get lessons, learn to play a musical instrument. So, instead of trying to fucking genuinely say like, look, social programs actually absolutely work in tackling the crime rate. These kids need better safety nets, a better future. They need to work for a better future that we as in American society have failed to offer them. You know what I mean? Instead of doing all that shit, we're just trying to tackle it by becoming more draconian. And that's what the Republicans want. But we're not doing that. We're instead legitimizing the underlying faulty premise that crime is happening as a natural phenomena, and it's happening as a consequence of like some intrinsic factors at play here, specifically in black neighborhoods, which is an inherently racist attitude to have.
A district attorney in Northern California is sounding the alarm over the sheer amount of criminal suspects released, only to end up committing more crimes. And he's got some shocking numbers to back up his concerns. Jeff Reisig is the district attorney for Yolo County, California. He's also the president of the California District Attorneys Association. Jeff, great to talk to you and finally get some statistics and some hard numbers to put with the perception that a lot of people across this country have. In June of this year, your office started tracking which offenders released without bail.
I'm going to be honest, I don't even believe that for a second, the 70% recommitted. I don't even believe that for a fucking second. I'm sorry. Especially because we've seen people, first of all, this is no cash bail policies, which is different than like early release. And early release has been so fundamentally successful that out of 11,000 people that have been released early, okay, and that process is not as easy as the way Fox News presents it. It's not like, oh, are you a rapist murderer? Hello, go ahead. Oh, did you do 1 day in prison? Okay, time to release you. That's not how that works. It is a brutal process, regardless of the new new measures, regardless of the new measures that have been put in place. It's usually people that have served out 2/3 of their sentence. You know what I mean? Like 10 years out of a fucking 15-year sentence, for example. And they let them out in 10 instead of making them serve 15. And it's because they already have demonstrated good behavior. A process that is already inherently racist, a process that is already being looked at by a bunch of racist-ass, old-ass judges and shit. Like, these guys, if they're being released early, it means that they have somehow been able to avoid, like, becoming a more hardened criminal in prison, which is something that you need to do to basically fucking survive in prison. Like, they've done the unimaginable. And that's precisely why, out of the 11,000 people that have been let out on early release, only 17 have reoffended, and most of those are for drug charges, like parole violations, like you got tested and you smoked weed, so you're going back to prison. 17 out of 11,000 prisoners that were released. 17. That recidivism rate is so fucking insanely marginal and tiny that it is a gangbusters program. It is probably the most successful program in that is the most successful criminal justice rehabilitation program on the planet, okay? Like, unimaginable. That's better than fucking Norway, dude, okay? Literally. 17%? You think 17 people out of 11,000 is 17%? If it was 17%, that would still be worldwide, record-breaking low recidivism. But it's not 17%. It's like 0.01%. Even if it was 17%, that would be like better than like Norwegian recidivism rates.
Bail went on to commit new crimes in Yolo, California. And here's what you find. Of the 595 individuals released,
0% or it's useless. Got to work on these reactionary takes, my man. You're joking, right? There is no system on the planet where there is like 0%. Why are you leftist losers jumping? Oh yeah, he's joking. Okay, he said Dan Bon Jovi.
420 were rearrested for new crimes. That's a 70.6% recidivism rate. And of those 103 offenders, 20% were rearrested for violent crimes, including murder, attempt murder, kidnapping, robbery, carjacking, and domestic violence. What did you think when you saw those numbers?
It's a staggering number. I mean, it frankly it shocks the conscience to think that many new crimes were committed by these people, released on zero bail, and all of the new victims. That's what I thought about, all of the new victims who had been created as a result of this policy.
So how is it that those people ended up on the streets in the first place? Was it purely the guidelines of the California Judicial County? Was it the way that they were charged? What led to them getting back on the streets?
Right. Well, during 2020 and the first part of 2021, we were under a mandated zero bail policy because of court actions and local actions as well, not my choosing. But zero bail was the rage in California during the pandemic. And as a result, you had people.
Oh my God. Okay, listen. Part of the fucking reason, why they had this is because the California prison system is so insanely overcrowded. This is a problem that is caused by the very same issue that they're fucking on the other side of. The reason why California was like, yeah, we got to fucking release some of these prisoners as a consequence of COVID was because like they were standing on top of one another. They were literally, the prisons are overcrowded in California. People think California is communism land, when in fact, it's liberalism land, and liberalism is very reactionary and still arrests an insane amount of people. California's prisoner population is massive. California's prisoner per capita population is larger than most other countries on the planet. If California as an individual state was a nation state, it would still have some of the highest prisoner density on the planet. Obviously, this is the same for most of the United States of America. However, California is uniquely bad. Maybe not as bad as like Louisiana, but pretty fucking bad. And of course, a big chunk of that comes from the drastic economic inequality that people are subjected to in liberal safe havens like California. And the issue is that the prison system, which by the way you could learn more about, it sucks to like weirdly plug my take, but like I have a friend who actually went into he was in county jail. California prisons are fucking awful. California has 114,000 prisoners. Germany has 44,588. Yeah. So anyway, the California prison system is really awful. If you want personal details about it, I have a friend, Jeff Whittick, who actually went into LA County Jail and served a prison sentence there and was actually let out early as a consequence of COVID. And he goes through the steps of what you have to do to survive in prison in LA County Jail specifically. I talked about it with him on the podcast Fear and. It's a really good episode. It's unfortunately behind a paywall, but if you want to watch it, you can go to patreon.com/fear and watch the video where he basically details like what he has done, what he had to do in prison to protect himself, and how like the prisoners basically ran the show within the jail. It's a gruesome and horrifying story in general. Luckily, he survived it, obviously. Per capita, California has over 500 prisoners for 100,000 people, whereas Germany has 70. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, real fascinating. Now, there's another problem here, though. And the other problem is a lot of people end up doing crimes again. Why? Because the underlying reasons as to why they did the crime in the first place has not changed. And then the solution to that person doing that kind of crime is never rehabilitation, but instead just putting him in a system that will force him to do even more crime and become an even more hardened criminal within the prison system in order to fucking survive. And then lastly, there are no alternative options once that person is released from jail that will allow them to bounce back and fix the underlying problems that they experienced. So we are in this like incredible circumstance where our prisons are overflowing. There is no way to solve some of the underlying material conditions as to why crime even happens. Okay, so then they just like they just decide like, oh, what's the most woke way to deal with this? The most liberal woke way to deal with it is the exact same way that we deal with homeless people, which is, of course, hilariously, laughably brutal, which is, hey, look the other way. Let homeless people live on the street and eat trash and look the other way. That's the woke thing to do. God forbid we offer them housing. God forbid we have a housing first policy in dealing with homelessness and tackling this insane crisis. God forbid we normalize the housing market so that people aren't every day, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people aren't getting priced out of housing in places like California where their jobs are. You know, God forbid we do any of that. Just let them fucking live on the street and eat trash and come jerk off, outside of your house. That's the liberal solution. The Republican solution is just to murder them. And it sucks because there is an adequate solution that other countries have utilized. Vienna is a good example of this, Red Vienna. And European social democracies have great examples of this, where they do have better pricing for their housing. It's hilariously stupid when you put it into plain terms. This guy stole a car and sold it for drug money. How do we help him? Let's make it so that employers won't hire him into legit jobs and then repeatedly fine him for his drug addiction so he has massive debt that he can't pay off through legal means. That will help. Yeah. But ultimately, when you put that dude through the system, that dude is a slave. Now you have a slave for the remainder of his years. You know what I mean? He's in the system early on. He has no options. How the fuck is he going to overcome any of that stuff? He's not. So now he's in the system, and when you're in the system, you can go make license plates for a penny an hour. You know, it's great. You can go fight wildfires in California for 2 cents an hour. Would you be okay with housing for the homeless in your neighborhood? Yes, you fucking idiot. Why wouldn't I? I already house homeless people in this neighborhood. They're just living in a fucking tent. I would much rather have them live in a house. What kind of psychotic take is that? Yo, that only is a gotcha if you're just an inhumane piece of shit. You understand? Like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? Which one's better? Having the homeless people have shelter over their heads so they have basically one of their most profoundly important needs met so that they can get on a pathway to recovery and actually talk to social workers, be able to shower, be able to fucking look for jobs, have internet, electricity, have one of their needs met. Yeah, I would much prefer that to fucking living, to have them live in a fucking tent. To have an address too, that's huge. And for the record, before someone says, oh, why don't you put them in your house then? Like, motherfucker, I live in a house so I don't have to have roommates, okay? There's a difference between privacy. I don't want to have random people, whether they're homeless or not, living in my fucking house. So shut the fuck up. Not the same. But here it is. Police in these West Coast cities disproportionately arresting unhoused people from 2017 through 2020. Unhoused people made up almost an estimated 2% of the population in each of the following cities. However, they made up in Portland 50% of the people that were arrested. 50%. They were 2% of the population, but made up 50% of the people who were arrested. Sacramento, 42%. Los Angeles, 24%. San Diego, 11%. Oakland, 7%. What do you think is going on here? It's great. What do you mean? This doesn't take into account the proportion of crimes being committed, though, right? Brother, we live in an anti-homeless, anti-poor country, okay? We live in a capitalist country. Homeless people are not productive, okay? They're not productive workers. So the attitude of capital owners is that they should fucking die or go away or be converted into productive workers, possibly at gunpoint. So, yes, while some of those unhoused people that are getting arrested because they're like, you know, doing public indecency. Some of that is also public indecency as a consequence of not having a place to fucking shit, right? No place for hygiene. Some of it is because they are mentally incredibly unwell, okay? And they need mental health treatment. And some of that is because they're just fucking brain broken from, their brains have been fried from like living out and subjecting themselves to the conditions of nature for many, many fucking years. And yes, they have violent outbursts. Yes, of course. Like valid reasons to arrest someone. Or there are, of course, valid reasons to arrest some homeless people, for sure. But a big chunk of the reason for why 50%, despite making up 2% of the population in the city, estimated 2% of the population, they make up 50%, is because there are laws written specifically that make it illegal to be homeless. There are valid reasons for why homeless people get incarcerated. Certainly, I'm not going to say that that's not the case. But there are infinitely more awful reasons why people jail homeless people. So yeah, it's not an accident. There's also, for those of you who don't know, there is violent architecture, for example, or hostile architecture.
Someone fed a coin. This was
if you recall, you know how when I went to Amsterdam, they had like weird spikes under bridges and shit. And I asked, like, why do they have these weird spikes? And those spikes were so that, birds couldn't fucking shit under the bridges. Because that shit would erode the bricks and whatnot. And they weren't real spikes. They just like basically made it so that birds could not stand on them. That exact same thing is what these cities do to homeless people. They create incredibly hostile architecture on purpose so that people can't sleep on the streets, on benches and whatnot. Like in New York, I believe they took out the benches in the... here it is. Yeah, after the government of Sao Paulo, Brazil installed rocks to prevent houses from resting under this bridge, a local priest decided to destroy them. Look at this. When you sit on a bench that's this size, that is by design. It's so that no one can sleep on it. When you see a bench that has this kind of thing in the middle of it, you're like, why does this have this thing in it? That's so that homeless people can't sleep on it. This is called hostile design, hostile architecture. The answer, of course, is not to make sure that like our benches are better so that homeless people can sleep on it. The answer, of course, is homes. What if we kissed at the Pride-themed anti-homeless spike-covered underpass? Yeah. There it is. Wonderful. Good stuff. Every part of society is designed against homeless people. Every part of society is designed against people who have been priced out of the housing market, who are just trying to make ends meet, who are just trying to survive, who probably could if given the opportunity, if they didn't get priced out of the housing market and didn't have to live in their cars until they had to sell their cars and lose their job as a consequence of not having hygienic products readily available, and to make themselves look presentable for jobs and whatnot, going down that trajectory of eventually becoming homeless and becoming like the worst case of homelessness, which is when you're also trying to self-medicate because you're in a horrifying situation. Your number one need is not being met. You don't have an address. You have no way of cleaning yourself up. You don't have clean clothes. You have no laundry machine. All these things that we take for granted, living inside of homes and apartments and whatnot, they have no access to. That fucks you up. That breaks your fucking brain. I said tier 3 homelessness the other day, and that really resonated with some normie friends I was chatting to about homelessness. Yeah, I've described this before. I call it 3 tiers of homelessness. I know it sounds like inhumane to describe it in such terms, but a lot of even chatters themselves have actually fucking gone through this. Tier 1 homelessness is the invisible homelessness. There are homeless people around you right now that are housing insecure that you don't even recognize. That is a person that has gotten priced out of the housing market but still has a job oftentimes. It is a person that has at least some material possessions that they've put in their car or are either doing that or couch surfing. Okay? They don't have a home, but they're couch surfing. They're living with someone else. You know, as they become more burdensome to people around them, and it becomes harder and harder to maintain a job. That's tier 1. Tier 2 homelessness is when you are living in your car, okay, and you lose your car basically, or you're living in your car and your car gets towed. You're living in your car and you get ticketed because there's a lot of anti-homelessness provisions that make it so that you can't even live in your fucking car, right? You have no consistent way of showering. You have no consistent way of cleaning your clothes. It becomes increasingly harder and harder for you to keep a job. You have no address. Sometimes you might not even have a bank account. You become tier 2 homeless in that situation. You've been priced out of the housing market, and now you have no means of recovery. And then you arrive at tier 3 homelessness, which oftentimes is when you have been living as a homeless person, as a houseless person for an extended period of time. You start doing drugs in order to self-medicate, to basically, cope with the reality that you have been served. And ultimately, throughout the different years of living through homelessness, you no longer have a method of dealing with it. Your brain starts fucking frying. You have trauma. Because when you're tier 2 homeless, or even tier 1 homeless, or definitely in tier 3 homelessness, you're constantly getting assaulted. Okay? You're getting assaulted by the conditions of nature, which is the reason why, even fucking cavemen lived in goddamn caves. You know what I mean? You need shelter. You're constantly being assaulted by other people, whether it be other homeless people or other non-homeless people that are fucking beating the shit out of you, stealing your shit. This is a ongoing problem. If you're a woman, it's especially traumatic because there's also sexual assault on top of that. This happens inside of shelters even more frequently. Part of the reason why shelters are not an adequate solution. If you've ever talked to a homeless person, or if you've ever read about this sort of thing, you understand that shelters are really just not good at all. They're awful. People steal your shit. That is, if you're lucky enough to be able to bring your shit into the shelter, because shelters oftentimes will not allow you to bring any of your material possessions. They won't let you bring your pets. They won't let you bring your material possessions, and you have to be cold turkey. And going cold turkey is not exactly easy if you're already hooked on drugs. So a lot of people literally choose to, and then when you pair that up with assault, and when you pair that up with the likelihood of sexual assault and property theft, all of a sudden, it seems better to sleep in a fucking tent than have a roof over your head when you're inside of a shelter. So you're making that bargain in your head year over year, okay? Then you're also taking drugs on the side. Your brain becomes completely fucking warped. Once you're on the third tier of homelessness, that is the type of homeless person that you regularly see in public and have negative experiences with, negative associations with. That's the lady with the hardened leather-looking skin that is half naked. You know what I mean? That's what people think about when they think about homeless people. That's the person that is the homeless person that is the most easily dehumanized by mainstream media. That's the homeless person that you probably had a negative association with. And that's part of the reason why you're like, oh no, we can't help these people. They're all on drugs. They're all crazy. And of course, that's the homeless person that is the hardest to deal with as well. That is the hardest to bring back into society. That's the hardest to heal. And no matter which tier of homelessness we're talking about, the most adequate way is to use a housing first policy. Immediately find them permanent shelter, to give them a sense of autonomy, to help them regain their humanity. You can immediately tackle every tier 1 homeless person that way, immediately. Like, you have provided them with shelter, all of a sudden, boom, their problems are gone. 99% of their problems are gone. Same with tier 2 homeless people, which might require a little bit more care in the form of like social workers helping them out. And same with tier 3 homeless people as well, with more adequate mental health checks and therapy, immediate therapy, and recovery and rehabilitation programs that are readily available for them, training programs after they have gone on a pathway to recovery. In that way, one, you create an entire new industry that is currently super underfunded. I mean, there is a capitalist alternative to this even, okay? It's just you take a short-term profit cut. Your house is not going to be as expensive because now there's more houses that are readily available. If you're bought into the hospitality industry, maybe they took some of the motels and turned them into or converted them into housing. But now there's a new industry working on this, the gigantic new industry that's working on it. Now on top of that, your housing market, the housing market will recover ultimately because there's no fucking homeless people in your neighborhood in the long term. And ultimately, it would be better for society as well. But of course, capitalism forces people into thinking in short-term benefits. So they can't do that, especially if there's any kind of fucking short-term profit loss. Oh my God, that is the worst thing you could ever advocate for. God forbid.
People who were being arrested for all types of crimes, including felonies, and being immediately arrested into the community with no supervision, no oversight, no mandated treatment, no ankle monitor, no conversation with the victims of their original crimes. They were just being dumped out of the jails. And that's the number that we have, 70% reoffended, some within days, most within 6 months. Even though the voters rejected it in California, they rejected zero bail in 2020. So this is bad policy. It's a get out of jail free card. People are getting really hurt, even murdered because of these policies, and we just need to scratch it. This is not a good policy.
All right. Well, we'll see if these numbers now that we've got some hard figures, have any effect on other jurisdictions across the country. Jeff Reisig, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Portland homeless crisis is so fucking out of control. Make all drugs legal, but don't offer the mental health outreach programs that homeless people and substance abusers need. Yeah, it is really fucked up. Portland homeless crisis is very, very bad. The other states give their homeless one-way bus to get to Portland where drugs are decriminalized. The cops don't fuck with them. Non-profit government-operated homeless shelters get huge grants for being at max capacity. They get $10 million, scrape $2 million, line their pockets, and then shove the homeless back out with no help or resources. Yep. Listen, every part of the system that touches homeless people, which are the most, absolutely the most underserved population, oftentimes also predominantly black or Latino, like in fucking San Francisco, the Latino homeless population is insane. They conducted studies in the aftermath of COVID, and the Latino homeless population exploded in the Bay Area. Like, exploded in a way where people are like, what the fuck happened? We have no idea what's going on. Talk to people in Portland, and most of them don't want the homeless kicked out of there. We're tired of them. I know a lot of people say that. Because it seems as though there is no adequate way of dealing with homeless people. So the only adequate way of at least putting homeless people away or getting them away from your line of sight is by doing reactionary shit.
And they weren't allowed to, there was a 3-meter board. I learned a lot. And I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area. and I was one of the guards, and there weren't allowed to, there was a 3-meter board. And if you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off. Well, he came off, and he said, I'll meet you outside. My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, I'll be waiting for you. He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, what am I going to do? He said, come down here in the basement where all the pool filter is. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, you walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. I said, you kidding me? He said, no, if you don't come back. And he was right. So I walked out with the chain. And I walked up to my car. And they had, in those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, you apologize to me? I said, I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said. He said, okay, closed the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again. I came down here because I remember the first bumper sticker I saw that made me aware when I was in law school. Proudly for...
What do you mean? You guys can't fucking follow along with his insane ramblings, dude? He went back down to this poor black neighborhood that he was a lifeguard at. And at the pool, he told one of the guys, Corn Pop, who was a bad guy, who ran a bunch of bad dudes, bad boys. He called Corn Pop Esther Williams because he didn't have headgear when he was in the pool. And he kicked him out as the only white lifeguard. And then Corn Pop came back with a rusty razor blade. Back in the day, they used to fuck their razor blades up on purpose to make them rust so that, you know, you would do additional rust damage. Not just like a cut, but some poison damage on top of that. Yeah, +4. And he had a mechanic, the only other white guy that works there, cut the chain from the low end of the pool and hand it off to Biden so he could use it as a weapon against Corn Pop.
Holloway, proudly for your dad, first African-American state senator in the state of Delaware. Everything about. And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair.
It's getting weirder. Oh, it doesn't stop. It gets weirder and weirder.
Come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. And I tell you what, the men, they're now all men, the guys I work with down here, and they're all guys at the time. They're all good men. Most of them made an awful lot of themselves. And they're a
Dude, it's so good. I don't know what to say about this other than, like, such a great storyteller, dude.
Larkin had a rough time. And some of you knew Earl. I came back as a public defender. I came back to Delaware and I got